Synopsis of the Books of the Bible. 1 Samuel. By J.N. Darby. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God, and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. 2 Timothy 3 verses 16 and 17. Synopsis of the Books of the Bible. By John Nelson Darby. 1 Samuel, chapters 8 through 10. The people's demand for a king, Saul the man according to the flesh. But faith is not transmitted by succession. Samuel could not make prophets of his sons. They were no better as judges than Eli's sons had been as priests, and the people had no faith themselves to lean immediately upon God. They asked to be made like unto the nations. Make us now a king, said they to Samuel. Where was Jehovah? For Israel, nowhere. But it was evil in the eyes of Samuel, and he prayed unto Jehovah. While acknowledging that the people had, as usual, rejected him, God commands Samuel to hearken unto their voice. Samuel warns them according to God's testimony and sets before them all the inexpediency and consequences of such a step, but the people will not hearken unto him. God brings to the prophet, through providential circumstances, the man whom he had chosen to satisfy the carnal wishes of the people. In all this, he judges the people and their king. He gave them a king in his anger, and took him away in his wrath, but he remembers his people. He does not forsake them. He acts by Saul on their behalf, while showing them their unfaithfulness, and afterwards in cutting off the disobedient king. Beauty and height of stature distinguished the son of Kish. But in the signs that Samuel gave him when he had anointed him, there was a meaning which should have carried his thoughts beyond himself. How often there is a meaning, a language, perfectly intelligible to one who has ears to hear, but which escapes us because our gross and hardened heart has no spiritual intelligence or discernment. And yet our future hangs upon it. God has shown our incapacity for the blessing it involved. Nevertheless, the means were not wanting. Although the significance of this circumstance was less evident than that of the other signs, yet Rachel's sepulchre should have reminded Saul, the son and heir according to the flesh of the one who was born there, that the son of the mother's sorrow was the son of the father's right hand. Genesis 35 verse 18. God-given signs. Now God had not abandoned Israel, faith was still there, men were going up to God. There were some in Israel who remembered the God of Bethel, who had revealed himself to Jacob when he fled, see note 1, and who in his faithfulness had brought him back in peace, and God gave Saul favor in their eyes. The servants of the God of Bethel salute him and strengthen him on his way. But the hill of God was possessed by the garrison of the Philistines, another circumstance which, by its significance, should have gone to the heart of a faithful Israelite who desired the glory of God and the good of his people. But the sign which accompanied it made it much more forcible, for the Spirit of Jehovah came upon Saul in this place, and he was turned into another man, called therefore to do as occasion served him, for God was with him. 1 Samuel 10 verse 7. See note 2. Note 1. The God who had said to him in the day of his trouble, when driven out from before his enemy, that he would not forsake him. End of note 1. Note 2. Accordingly it was the spirit of prophecy, the spirit which acted in blessing, which indicated the presence of God, and that to which Saul should have recourse, even though, yea, because, the hill of God, the public seat of his authority in Israel, was in the hands of the enemies of the true people of God. This scene pictured the whole state of Israel. End of note 2. It often happens, that faith sets forth clearly what should be done, while the heart, waxen fat and unfaithful, does not see it at all. And what do these signs mean? There are those in Israel who remember the God of Bethel, and who seek him, upright and prepared hearts, who know him as the resource of faith. But the hill of God, the public seat of his strength, is in the enemy's hands. Still, if this be so, the Spirit of God is upon the man who takes cognizance of it, and it is at this very hill that the Spirit comes upon him. The name of God is also significative here. It is God abstractedly, God the Creator, God himself is in question. The Spirit of Jehovah comes upon Saul because he resumes the course of his relations with Israel. Samuel, not Saul, the link between God and the people. But Samuel is still the only one whom God recognizes as the link between himself and the people. It is when Saul has had to do with Samuel, that he is another man. He must wait for Samuel, that he may know what to do, and that blessing may rest upon him. He must thus acknowledge that blessing is connected with the prophet, and not act without him. He must wait for him with perfect patience, 7 days, a patience which, submitting to God's testimony, will not seek for blessing apart from his ways. The Philistine enemies. Here also we see in the Philistines the enemies who put faith to the proof. We have often enemies over whom we gain an easy victory, and on whose account we are considered spiritual, yet they are not such as, on God's part, and it may also be said on their own part, put faith to the proof. With these patience must have her perfect work. And the Philistines held this place with respect to Saul. It was all well that the people should be delivered from their other enemies, but they were not the ones which were a snare to them, and which manifested the power of the enemy in the very midst of Israel and the promises. Do spiritual powers rule over us in the assembly, in the place where the promises of God should be fulfilled? And what power do we seek to overthrow the power of evil and spiritual wickedness within the borders of the professing church? It was from the Philistines that Saul should have delivered the people of God, see 1 Samuel 9 verse 16. The hill of God was in the Philistines' hands, see also 1 Samuel 14 verse 52. If Saul had waited for Samuel, he would have declared unto him all that he should do. Now we shall see that, 2 years later, Saul is put to the proof as to this in the presence of the Philistines, and whatever may have been the delay, the thing had not been altered. All the intermediate success should have increased his faith and strengthened him in obedience. The choice of a king. Samuel calls the people together at Mizpeh. There he sets before them their foolishness in rejecting the God of their salvation. But he proceeds to the choice of a king, according to the command of God. God meets the wishes of the people. If the flesh could have glorified God, nothing was wanting to induce them to trust in him. God adapts himself to them in outward things, and further, as we know, had the people followed Jehovah, Jehovah would not have forsaken them. 1 Samuel 12 verses 20 to 25. And now that God has set up a king, those who will not own him are men of Belial. The people however scarcely see God in it at all. They only recognize him in those things which the flesh can perceive, such as the beauty of the king and the success of his arms, that is to say, the things in which God suits himself to nature, and in which he grants blessing, in order that he may be known and trusted. In this, they rejoice, but they go no farther. Faith is not of nature,